lived along as a widow for 20 years. I finally fell in love again and wanted to introduce my new boyfriend at a family gathering. But my 3 grown children tore me apart in front of everyone. They said I was losing my mind, accused me of handing over their inheritance to a stranger, and even called me shameless, said I was disgracing the family. They told me to get out, that I was no longer welcome in their home. 3 months later, they showed up at my doorstep one by one, suitcases in hand, begging me to take them back. But this time, I only opened the door for those who deserve it. I looked out the kitchen window and saw the street bathed in warm, cheerful light from the Christmas string lights already hanging from every porch. The whole neighborhood felt wrapped in something soft and glowing. I slipped the last batch of gingerbread cookies into a tin, sealed the lid, and let out a long breath. This Christmas wasn't like the others. For the first time in 20 years, I was doing something for myself. Walter was sitting on our old couch in the living room, round glasses perched on his nose, a well-worn book in his lap. He had that small smile he always wore when a line landed just right. When he noticed me watching, he raised his coffee cup. "Need me to taste one?" he teased, voice soft. I walked over, smiling, and handed him a slightly uneven gingerbread from the cooling rack. He took a bite, nodded slowly, as if judging a finalist on a baking show. "You nailed it," he said. "Tastes like home." I sat down next to him and leaned on his shoulder. There was no music playing, just the steady tick of the clock on the wall and the soft crunch of Walter chewing. "You sure you're ready?" I asked quietly. "You mean for tomorrow?" he replied, lowering his voice too. I nodded. He smiled again and gently laid his hand over mine. "Maggie, they're your children. You don't owe anyone an apology for being in love." I didn't answer right away. My eyes landed on the ornament, hanging from the mantel, just one of the dozens of things I used to put up for them each year. I stared at it for a few seconds. Of course I knew I shouldn't feel guilty. But guilt like that doesn't ask permission. It's just the raw residue left from years of putting yourself last. Frank died 20 years ago. James had just graduated. Amy was still in community college. And Ethan hadn't even gotten his driver's license. I gave everything time, energy, sleep. Identitito raised them. Days were for working. Nights were for cooking. Holidays, those were for babysitting. Romance felt like a luxury. Something frivolous. Selfish, even. Widows didn't get to fall in love again. Not decent ones. Anyway, then one afternoon, at the library near the harbor, the one that still smelled like old wood, and Salty was browsing poetry. And Walter was across from me. He was looking for an Emily Dickinson collection. I remember he looked up and asked, when she wrote, "Hope is the thing with feathers," do you think she was comforting herself or someone else? I looked into his eyes and felt, for the first time in years, like I understood someone, and more importantly, like I was being understood. It wasn't falling in love. It was finally speaking a language I'd forgotten I knew. In the year that followed, we watched 17 old movies together, 3 of them at outdoor screenings, hosted by the museum. We visited the Rose Gardens in Santa Barbara, where he bought me an old wooden hairbrush he called classic and elegant. He wandered through antique markets with me, letting me reconnect with the parts of myself I'd set aside to be a mother. Painting, gardening, opera. He told me once, my smile was worth more than anything in the museum gift shop. And now, I wanted to introduce this man to my children. I didn't need them to love him, but I hoped they could respect him, and respect that he made their mother happy in a way she hadn't been in a very long time. Walter must have noticed me drifting off in thought again. "What are you worried about now?" he asked. I shook my head. I don't want tomorrow to feel like a trial." He stood up and picked up the little gift bags I'd prepared, each labeled in my handwriting. James's held a vintage movie ticket album. Amy's had a deep green wool scarf I'd knitted myself. Ethan's was a limited edition jazz vinyl I knew he'd been hunting for. "You're too kind," Walter murmured. No one in their right mind could reject a mother this thoughtful and gracious. I looked down. "Maybe they won't reject a mother," I whispered. "But they might still reject a widowed woman who dares to love again." He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he carefully set the bags back on the table and helped me to my feet. "Let them," he said. "We're not walking into that house tomorrow to ask for permission. We're walking in to share something joyful." I nodded. Outside, the wind coming off the coast had softened. It felt less like a warning and more like an old quilt wrapping around my shoulders. Tomorrow, I would walk into that house not as someone's mother or someone's widow, but as Maggie. someone who had finally decided to make a choice just for herself. We arrived at James's house to the sound of Christmas carols already playing in the living room. His home was always meticulously decorated. The ruby-tipped star on top of the tree was one I had given them over a decade ago, back when he and his now estranged wife first moved into this 3-story colonial. The star was still there, shining and perfect, but no one mentioned where it came from. Walter and I stood at the door. He gave my hand a small squeeze, nothing dramatic, but it steadied me more than I expected. Amy opened the door. She wore a bright red sweater, and her smile faltered the moment she saw Walter. "Hi, Mom," she said flatly, giving Walter a quick glance. "And you are?" Before I could answer, James's voice came from inside. "Who is it? Is that Mom?" He appeared a moment later, dressed in a crisp suit and tie, looking more like he was headed to a board meeting than hosting a family holiday. He paused in the doorway, eyes sweeping over Walter. His expression wasn't surprised, it was evaluative, dismissive. "Come in," he said, with all the warmth of a voicemail prompt. We stepped inside just as Ethan leaned out from the kitchen, a chunk of cheese still in his mouth. He saw Walter, paused mid-chew, and frowned. I cleared my throat. "Kids, I wanted to take this Christmas gathering as a chance to introduce someone very important to me." "A friend," James said instantly, tone sharp. I nodded and gestured toward Walter. "I'm Walter Hayes," he said with a soft smile. "It's nice to meet your family." Ethan dropped the cheese and leaned against the kitchen doorway with crossed arms, visibly annoyed. Amy offered a polite smile, then looked away, avoiding further eye contact. James exhaled heavily and sank into the sofa. "Mom, do you realize how old you are?" I blinked. Before I could speak, he added, "You really think wasting your later years on some strange man is something we're supposed to get behind?" "James, that's enough," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Walter isn't a stranger. We've known each other for a year. I hoped you'd meet him. Get to know him." "Get to know him?" Amy scoffed suddenly. "If any of us were dating in our 60s, everyone would think we were pathetic." Ethan jumped in. "Do you really think you're 30 again? Be honest." "Mom, no one's going to deal with the mess if you get sick or if he drains your bank account." I stood frozen. My feet felt cemented to the floor. "I'm not asking you to deal with anything," I said, voice tight. "I just wanted to share my life with you. I've met someone who makes me feel happy, respected, and seen." James stood abruptly, stepping closer. His tone hardened. "Are you already planning to give him the house, your retirement fund, our family's assets?" I never said that. I stared at him, stunned. They had no idea that Walter, a retired history professor, was far more financially secure than I was. "But you've thought about it, haven't you?" he pressed. "Everything you saved all these years for this familius, just up for grabs now." A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "Everything I've done was by choice. But that doesn't mean you get to decide how I live the rest of my life." "Fine. Do whatever you want," Amy snapped, folding her arms. "Just don't expect our support. And don't throw around words like family to manipulate us." Ethan gave a dry laugh. "Seriously, where do you get the nerve? Bringing some old guy into our Christmas like he's one of us. You're embarrassing." The room fell dead silent. Only Silent Night played faintly in the background. Walter gently tugged on my arm and whispered, "Let's go." We turned to leave, and just as we reached the door, James fired the final shot. "Don't bother coming back. You're not welcome here anymore. I don't let love-drunk old women embarrass my household." I stopped, turned, looked straight at him. There was no flicker of regret in his eyes. Nothing but cold judgment. "So that's how it is," I said, voice low and raw. I picked up the gift bags I had carefully prepared, each one labeled, thoughtfully filled. I paused, then slowly, quietly, placed them back on the table. "Have a Merry Christmas," I said, turning to all of them. "I truly hope you find peace." I took Walter's hand and walked out of the house I had once helped decorate, once called home. The door slammed behind us. The wind had picked up sharp and unfriendly. The porch lights swayed like they were trying to shake off the weight of what just happened. Walter pulled me closer. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer, just nodded. Truth is, I didn't know if I was shivering from the cold or from the shame. But one thing was clear. I had spent 2 decades raising 3 children, and not one of them had learned how to respect me. By the time we got back to my place, it was completely dark. Walter insisted on driving me home, said it wouldn't be good for me to be alone. I tried to brush him off, told him I was fine, but when I slid the key into the lock, my hand trembled. The living room was pitch black. I didn't turn on the lights. I just took off my coat, hung it on the hook by the door, and sank into the couch, staring at the blank wall ahead of me. Walter sat beside me in silence. He didn't rush to say anything, always knew when to be quiet. Their words were still ringing in my ears. You should be ashamed. Don't expect our support. You're disgracing the family. None of them were fatal wounds, but each one landed like a knife to the bone. I always thought that while my relationship with my kids wasn't perfect, it was at least strong. I had done so much, sat up all night with James through fevers, scraped together rent money for Amy during her college years, let Ethan rack up charges on a credit card in my name without ever saying no. And now, I had committed the ultimate sin of falling in love after 60. They acted like I'd betrayed them. They didn't even care to hear the story. I wiped my face, trying to pull myself together, but the tears kept coming. I didn't sob. I didn't speak. I just let myself cry. Walter reached over and pulled me into his arms. I rested my head on his shoulder. He didn't say a word, just rubbed slow circles on my back, steady and warm. After a while, I sniffled and gave him a crooked smile. Was I being naive? I baked cookies, wrote cards, thought I was giving them a gift. Walter shook his head. No, Maggie, you weren't naive. You were kind. You've always been the one thinking about everyone else. I lowered my voice. But when was the last time they thought about me? About what it's like to be alone this long? He didn't answer. Just looked at me in that way he does, like he sees it all and holds it without judgment. I knew he got it, but he couldn't carry this pain for me. The next morning, I was outside pruning the roses. Even though it was winter, a few of them were still blooming soft pink against the crisp air. The sun filtered down over the lawn. It was so quiet. I could hear the click of the shears and the faint sound of birdsong in the distance. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A social media notification. I glanced at the screen. Amy had posted a photo. She, James, and Ethan were standing in front of the Christmas tree. The kids gathered around them, smiling for the camera. The caption read, "Wishing peace and joy to every family." I tapped into the comments. A neighbor had asked, "Where's Maggie?" Amy had replied, "We've cut ties. Please respect our privacy." I froze. The pruning shears were still in my hand, the blade poised just above a rose stem. But I didn't press down. I wasn't heartbroken. I was clear. They didn't just reject Walter. They had erased me. Like I was the weed that didn't fit in their carefully trimmed garden. Just then, my phone rang. It was Vivian. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said as soon as I answered. Her voice was tight with anger. "I saw it," I said quietly. "This is beyond cruel." She paused. "But you know what this is really about, don't you? It's not that you did anything wrong. It's that they're afraid. Afraid of losing the control they've always had over you. You've been their safety net for so long. They forgot it was something you gave, not something they're owed. Now that you've stopped playing by their rules, they're spiraling." I said nothing. Just let her speak. "Maggie, you've got to ask yourself, how long are you going to keep trying to win them over? You've already spent half your life sacrificing for them. Don't you think it's time you lived for yourself?" I paused, then said, very softly, "You're right. I've spent all my energy being a good mother, but I've never once asked myself if I was a happy woman." There was a quiet on the other end. Then Vivian said gently, "You're finally waking up, and it's not too late." After we hung up, I took the pruned roses and arranged them in an old glass vase. Set it in the center of the kitchen table. Walter walked in and gave me a searching look. "You okay today? Better than yesterday?" I nodded. "Walter, I want to make some changes." He sat down slowly. "I'm listening. I don't want to live for anyone else anymore. I don't want to keep holding things together for the sake of appearances. I need to start somewhere." "What are you thinking?" he asked. I walked into the study and opened the drawer I hadn't touched in years. Pulled out account statements, property records, joint ownership forms, all the paperwork that had kept me tethered to people who treated me like a backup plan. "I want them to know," I said, "I'm not their ATM. I'm not a default caretaker. And I'm not the mother they can throw out when I'm inconvenient, then come back to when it suits them." Walter nodded, his expression steady. "I'll be right here with you." In that moment, I knew my real home wasn't the 3-story house filled with old traditions and entitlement. It was wherever I stood beside someone who saw me, respected me, and stayed. They had thrown me out of their house. But now, I was inviting myself back into my own life. I spent the entire afternoon going through every financial tie I had with my children, line by line. I'd never done anything like this before. For the past 20 years, whenever they came asking, my answer had always been yes. James's failed investments, Amy's rent running late, Ethan maxing out his credit card. He always thought, they're my kids. How could I not help? But now I understood something I hadn't before. Not all help comes from love. Some of it comes from guilt. And guilt, when it becomes habit, becomes a cage. What I thought was family was often just self-erasure. I picked up the phone and called my bank's account manager. My voice was calmer than I expected. Hi, this is Margaret Delaney. I need to cancel some authorized cards. Of course. Which card holders? The woman asked. I took a breath and spoke clearly. Ethan Martin. There was a brief pause on her end. Then she replied. Understood. That card will be frozen within 24 hours and removed from the account thereafter. Thank you. One more thing, I want alerts for any large transactions. I want to personally approve everything going forward. When I hung up, I didn't feel conflicted. I felt light, like I just unhooked a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for decades. The next morning, I called our family's financial advisor. The East Haven house me late husband Frank and I saved for years to buy it. After he passed, I held on to it like a lifeline. The kids always assumed it would pass down to one of them. Amy even said once, Mom, when you're gone, that house is mine. Right, it's perfect for me and Emma. I didn't answer then. I just smiled. But that day, I picked up the phone and said, I want to list the house. The advisor double-checked. You mean the standalone property in East Haven? Yes, that one. I'll have it cleared out by spring. Go ahead and prepare it for listing. I could hear the surprise in his pause. But then he recovered. Understood. I'll get the paperwork started. I followed up with a text to Amy. Simple. Direct. The East Haven house will be listed next spring. You'll need to find other arrangements. I'll give you time and support to transition, but I suggest you stop making assumptions. The phone rang less than 5 minutes later. Of course, it was her. Mom, what does that mean? Her voice was already cracking. You said the house would go to me and Emma. I never said that for certain, Amy. I said we'd talk about it later. So you're doing this because of him, because of Walter. Did he talk you into this? No, I said calmly. This was my decision. Mine alone. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then her tone sharpened with emotion. You've lost your mind. You gave us everything our whole lives. And now, because of some stranger, you're cutting us off. He's not a stranger, I said, voice firm. Walter has shown me more respect than any of you have in years. He's never mocked my age, questioned my choices, or made me feel small. But the moment I dared to find joy again, you all turned on me. She tried to interject. But I didn't let her. I've said what I needed to say. What you do now is your choice. But I won't make space in my life for people who treat me like a backup plan. I ended the call, set the phone on the kitchen table, and took a deep breath. Walter stood in the doorway, arms crossed gently, his gaze steady. You know, I said as I walked over to him, resting against his chest. I don't think I've ever been this sure of anything. I am not their tool, and I'm sure as hell not their emergency wallet. He kissed my forehead, smiling. Now that's the woman I know. Over the next few days, I shut it all down, canceled every secondary card, cut off the auto payment, Samy's tutoring bills for Emma, Ethan's gym membership, James's just-in-case credit line that never saw a repayment. Let them figure it out. Then I turned to my own life. I bought perennials from the garden center, the kind I always said were too expensive. I booked a weekend trip with Walter, just for the two of us. No family visits, no errands, just a we want to. I took down the old family photo collage that had been hanging in the hallway for 20 years. In its place, I framed a photo of Walter and me outside a used bookstore, the sunlight spilling across our clasped hands. It looked like a life I had chosen, because it was. None of these things were in any parenting manual. They weren't in the Bible. No family handbook would ever call them proper. But each one brought me closer to something I hadn't felt in decades myself. They never imagined I'd walk out of that suffocating version of motherhood. They never thought I'd stop cooking, cleaning, paying, fixing, smoothing things over. And they sure as hell never imagined I'd stop choosing them over me. But I did. This wasn't rebellion. This was a decision. I'm not a difficult mother. I'm a woman who finally learned that no matter how old you are, you have the right to stop being drained and start being cherished. The house in East Haven, the one I'd once planned to leave to Amy, was about a 20-minute drive from where I live now. I had truly meant it at one point. It was close to the community hospital where she worked. The neighborhood was quiet and safe, and in the front yard stood a tall oak tree I had planted myself years ago. But now, the swing hanging from that tree was rusted, and Amy had never lifted a finger to care for the place. That evening, Amy and Ethan showed up at my door unannounced. No call, no warning, not even a polite knock, just walked in like they owned the air. You're seriously going to sell the house? Amy stood in the middle of my living room, fists clenched. You didn't even bother to discuss it with me. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets like a backup act ready to chime in. I didn't need to discuss it, I said, calmly seated at the dining table. It's my house. You've been hinting for years that you'd leave it to me. She snapped. I'm raising Emma on my own. You know how hard it is to rent. And now you're just selling it. Is this because that old man got in your ear? Walter hasn't influenced a single decision. I cut in. What I've realized is that all those so-called hints I gave you over the years, they were feeding a sense of entitlement. And I'm done doing that. Ethan jumped in. So what, you're gonna depend on Walter now? You even know what kind of money he has. What if he drains you dry? I looked at him, my tone cooling. Ethan, I remember your monthly credit card balance better than you do. You've been spending my money on my account, and you have the nerve to question how I spend my money. He shut up. His face tightened. I got up, walked to the drawer, pulled out a stack of paperwork, and laid it flat on the table in front of them. These are bank statements I requested last week. Go ahead, take a look. See how much I've transferred to each of you in the last 5 years. How many bills I've paid. How many insurance premiums I've covered. Amy flipped through the pages, her face draining with each line. You're not kids anymore. Ethan, you're in your 30s. Amy, you're a mother yourself. Everything I've done for you is never an obligation. It was love. But love isn't the same as entitlement. They stood in silence. No defense. No apologies. I'm canceling every authorized card. No more bills. No more insurance. No more tuition payments. Starting next month, not another penny. Amy slammed her hand against the table. You're losing it. You're really going to give your whole life over to a man we barely know. Ethan added sharply. You think anyone else will take care of you like we would? What happens when he gets sick or bails? You'll be crying for us to come clean up the mess. Whatever soft place I still held in my heart for them, it shattered. I stood tall, my voice low and even. When you said those things, did it ever occur to you that I've lived 20 years alone? Did any of you ever ask what that felt like? Who held me when I was the one who needed comfort? They were quiet, and for the first time, I saw something in their eyes that looked a little like shame. Then Walter's voice came from the hallway. I'm right here. He stepped into view, wearing his gray cardigan, calm but unmistakably firm. I've never taken a dime from her, he said. In fact, I've opened a joint medical fund in both our names. That was my idea. He turned to Amy. You know, I was going to set up an education trust for Emma. A gift, a gesture of goodwill. To show I wanted to be part of this family. But it's clear I'm not welcome. Amy's face shifted, about to reach for a new script. Walter didn't let her speak. I can live with not being liked. But what I saw today wasn't just dislike, it was a complete lack of respect for the woman who's done everything for you. And with that, he turned and walked back into the kitchen. I looked at the two of them. I think it's time for you to go. Mom, Amy's voice wavered. Softer now, maybe even desperate. Can't we just think this through? I raised my hand. Don't. I see it clearly now. It's never been about me. It's always been about what I could give you. They didn't move. Not right away. I walked over and opened the front door. I'm not kicking you out of my life, but I am done letting you control mine. They finally left. The door shut behind them with a weighty finality. I sat back down at the table and didn't move. Walter came in a few minutes later and set a cup of hot lemon tea in front of me. The steam curled gently into the room. This time, he said softly, you really let them go. I nodded slowly. I don't owe them anything, I said, voice steady. That debt's been paid in full. I don't know if every woman gets a second chance at 66. But I know now I did. Walter and I went to Monterey and stayed at a small inn near the beach. At night, you could hear the waves brushing against the sand, slow and steady like breathing. That first night, I barely slept. Not because I was restless, because I hadn't felt this kind of quiet in years. The kind without anyone needing something. The kind without weight. The next morning, we walked along the shore before the sun had fully risen. The air smelled like salt and pine. I carried my shoes in one hand, my feet sinking softly into the cold sand with every step. Each one felt like walking into a different version of myself. Walter looked over and smiled. You look like a kid who just got out of school. We had breakfast at a little cafe near the water. He ordered banana pancakes. I chose the smoked salmon toast. The sun poured in through the windows, soft and gold. I looked down at my plate and laughed a little. What's funny? He asked. I think this is the first time in years I ordered something just because I wanted it. I said. Usually I pick the cheapest thing on the menu. Because I'm always thinking better save it. James needs to make his insurance payment. Or Emma's birthday is coming up. Walter set down his fork and looked at me. So what are you going to order from now on? Whatever I damn well please. I grinned. Price be damned. That morning, I sat out on the inn's little balcony and finished an entire book. No interruptions. No phone calls. No one calling me mom. No one needing me. Just me. A woman who likes gardening. And poetry. And black and white movies. And walking barefoot at the edge of the Pacific. When we got home, Walter took me to the community center where his daughter Carla worked. She was a program coordinator, smart, kind, and no-nonsense, just like her father. She welcomed me with a hug and invited me to take part in a roundtable she was organizing, Voices of Women Over 50. At first, I hesitated, but I said yes. 7 of us gathered in that room: retired teachers, widowed musicians, nurses who lived alone. Each of us took a turn sharing the bravest decision we'd made in the past 5 years. When it was my turn, I took a breath. I told my children I was in love. I said. They didn't like it. They kicked me out of their house. But I didn't back down. I chose to live my life. The room went silent. Then applause. And in that moment, it hit me. All of us, sitting around that table, had been taught the same things. Be a good mom. A good wife. A good daughter-in-law. Don't cause trouble. Don't ask for too much. Don't disappoint anyone. But no one ever taught us how to not disappoint ourselves. In the months that followed, I started helping Carla run a new program, our Women Who Start Late salon. We met every 2 weeks. We talked about things no one ever talked to us about. The shame of remarrying. Financial independence. How to stop being manipulated by guilt. How children are part of your life but not all of it. We didn't tiptoe. We said it all. And we said it better than anyone else could. That spring, I was invited to speak on a local podcast. The topic, rediscovering yourself after 60. The host asked, when did this transformation begin? I answered, the day I stood in my son's living room while they humiliated me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just took my partner's hand and walked out of a house that no longer welcomed me. He nodded. Any regrets? I smiled. Just one, that I didn't do it sooner. The episode went viral. Thousands of women left comments like, she's who I want to be. This gave me the push I needed. I'm 70. It's not too late. And I thought, yes, this is who I was always supposed to be. Relationships often come down to one thing, need. And the moment I stopped being needed, my phone went completely silent for over 2 months. No more of Amy's usual mom. Can you cover the utility bill this week? No more alerts about Ethan's credit card charges. No more texts from James asking if I'd be at Emma's weekend soccer game. At first, I thought they were serious about cutting ties. But I came to understand something. People don't really let go until life forces their hand. That afternoon, I had just finished helping Carla pack up after a salon gathering. We were folding chairs and laughing about something someone had said when my phone rung an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mom, it's me. It was James. I didn't say anything. Just waited. I was hoping we could talk. Is now a bad time? His voice didn't carry that usual edge, the tone he always used when he was informing me of things. This time, he was asking. I paused, then said, where are you? I'm at your front door. For a second, I wanted to hang up, but I didn't. When I got home, he was sitting on the front steps, suit wrinkled, tie loosened, holding a brown paper bag. He looked tired. He looked small. When he saw me, he smiled an awkward, sheepish smile. I brought you that orange peel tea you like, he said, holding up the bag. I remembered you used to have a cup every morning. I didn't take the bag. Didn't acknowledge the memory. What is it you wanted to talk about? I opened the door. I didn't invite him in, but he followed anyway. He lingered near the kitchen entrance. Too unsure to sit down. I want to apologize, he said, for what I said at the Christmas gathering. It was cruel. I know that. I hurt you. I'm not angry, I said flatly. I'm disappointed. He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. How's the divorce going? I asked. That got his attention. He looked up, startled. How did you know? I didn't, but I guessed. He gave a bitter laugh. I lost the case. Mary got the house. Took half the money, too. I'm renting for now. Work's not stable either. There were layoffs, and my team got cut. I just listened. You know what I regret most? He said after a pause, voice quieter. Not the divorce. Not the money. It's that I let myself feel ashamed of you, for being in love. I felt something stir inside me, but I didn't let it show. I cared too much about how it looked, about what having a mother is supposed to mean. But I never once asked what you wanted. He swallowed. I've been a lousy son. I let the silence settle for a beat before I said, I don't want to talk about good or bad anymore. That was a child's scorecard. You're an adult now. You make your choices, and you own the outcomes. He nodded. I understand. So, are you here because you want forgiveness, or because you need something? He gave a tight, sad smile. Maybe both. I looked at him carefully, then said, clearly and without hesitation, you're here because you're in trouble, not because you understand. Needing help doesn't mean you've earned another piece of me. He got it. I saw it hit him. You brought a bag of tea and thought a gesture could erase how you humiliated me in front of everyone. I continued, voice steady. I remember holding you through fevers when you were a boy. And I also remember you calling me a delusional old woman to my face, in front of Walter. He didn't argue. He lowered his head, silent. I have a heart, James, but I'm also a mother who deserves respect. I leaned back against the counter. You only remember me when something in your life breaks. But when I needed your support, even just your decency, you vanished. The room was still. Then he said quietly, I could move back in, help take care of you. I stared at him, then asked slowly, would you be coming back to take care of me, or because you don't have anywhere else to go? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes gave it away. I nodded. Then no, James, you don't need to. He stood there for another moment like he wanted to say something else but couldn't find the words. When he finally left, he didn't look back. That night, I made myself a cup of the orange peel tea. Sat at the kitchen table. No tears. No shaking. Just a new kind of stillness. The kind that comes from realizing. Love is not debt. And forgiveness is not an obligation. A few days after James showed up, Amy came. No call. No text. Just her at my door with Emma in her arms and a cracked plastic storage bin at her feet. I opened the door to find Emma bundled in a blanket far too thin for the weather, her cheeks flushed from the cold. My first instinct was heartbreak. But that feeling didn't even make it all the way up my chest. Memories got to it first and shoved it right back down. Mom, Amy said, I just need to stay a few nights. Just until I find a new place. I looked at her carefully. What happened? Why'd you leave so suddenly? She avoided my eyes. The landlord raised the rent last minute when it came time to renew. I nodded slowly. You know, the East Haven house is on the market now. The one you used to call your future home for you and Emma. She gave a small nod. Yeah, I know. I paused. Looked her over. Are you still hoping to move in there? She clenched her jaw. Do you have to phrase it like that? I'm just asking. I stepped aside. Come in. Emma's freezing. She carried her daughter in and sat down on the couch. Emma curled up on my lap and whispered a soft nana. I stroked her hair and said nothing. Amy's voice broke the quiet. Mom, I want to take care of you. No matter what happens, I'll be there if you're sick, if you need anything. I met her eyes. You're saying that because the house hasn't sold yet. You think there's still a chance. She hesitated. Her gaze flicked away. I didn't come to freeload. She said quickly. It's just, Emma's little. I have nowhere else to go. I sighed, gently lifted Emma into my arms to soothe her, then looked back at Amy. You stood across from me in James's house on Christmas. I said quietly. You looked at me like I was some foolish child. You told me I should be ashamed. Do you remember that? She nodded, eyes cast down. I went too far. No, I said. You couldn't stand to see me happy. She looked up. voice trembling. It's not that. I was scared. Scared that if something happened to you, no one would be there, that you'd be alone, that you were being taken advantage of. And then when you said you wanted to leave the house to someone else, I panicked. Not even a room for Emma. I nodded slowly. You weren't scared for me. You were scared that I'd stop being your safety net. She bit her lip. Didn't answer. I'm not dragging Emma into this. She's innocent. But you need to understand those days when a single text of Mom, I need help, guaranteed I'd drop everything. Those days are over. She started to cry. I really don't know where else to go. I was quiet for a while. Then I said, I'm going to say this once. I'm not your enemy. But I'm also not a god who grants unlimited chances, no matter how you treat me. She stared at me, stunned. I placed Emma back in her arms gently. You can stay the night. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the women's shelter. I know someone in the outreach program. They can help. Amy shot to her feet. You'd really throw us out like this? I looked her in the eye, calm and direct. Throw you out? You're the one who told people you cut ties with your mother. Now you want to say I'm the heartless one. She didn't respond. Just stood there, holding her daughter, stunned into silence. I didn't say another word, just walked over and opened the front door. And before it even fully closed behind her, Ethan came trudging up the porch steps, shuffling through dead leaves, dragging a suitcase behind him. His jacket zipper was broken, and for the first time, he looked truly disheveled. I don't have anywhere to go either, he said, dropping the bag. What? You gonna just let your son sleep on the street? Ethan, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You're 31. You've got a college degree, 2 working legs, and the full use of your hands. You haven't had a steady job in 3 years because you keep turning down anything that doesn't stroke your ego. And now this is my fault. He blinked, taken aback, then threw on his usual air of entitlement. Look, I know I've said some messed-up things, but I'm still your son. You can't just turn your back on me. I stared at him. You called me names. You mocked me for loving someone again. You told me I was embarrassing and should leave. Now that you're broke and desperate, you want to call me Mom again. I sighed. Life doesn't work like that. Both of them now stood outside my door, Amy crying, Ethan stiff with frustration. From upstairs, I heard the faint sound of a neighbor's window sliding open. Mom, we're sorry, Amy said, voice cracking. Please, just one more chance. I shook my head slowly. No apology will undo what you said. You didn't just hurt me, made it clear I didn't matter. Their voices started overlapping, pleading and panicked. I didn't say another word. I stepped back, picked up the phone, and dialed the number for our community patrol. Hi, it's Maggie, Unit 3B. I've got a group gathering at my door. Would you mind sending someone by? Less than 10 minutes later, 2 patrol officers arrived. I locked the door behind me, opened it just wide enough, and said the only thing left to say. They told me to get out. Now I'm asking them to do the same. After all the fallout, I thought I'd hit some kind of emotional rock bottom. But I didn't. What weighed me down wasn't their absence, it was the years I'd spent believing that being a mother was my only identity. And now that I'd finally let that role go, I expected to feel hollow. Instead, it felt like I'd taken off a coat made of lead. When spring came, the clematis on the balcony bloomed. Walter took a photo of the first blossom and posted it in our women's salon group chat with a caption that made me laugh out loud. One of retirement's most loyal companions. Doesn't yell, doesn't cost you anything, and still shows up every day just to bloom. In mid-April, I threw a small birthday gathering. No invites went out to my kids. No big gestures. Just Walter, Carla, and a few women from the salon. We set up a few folding tables in the community center's garden, filled jars with wildflowers, and let the scent of freshly mowed grass be our backdrop. Walter played Claire de Lune on an old upright piano they wheeled out from storage. As the music drifted through the spring air, I sat back, eyes closed, and let it wrap around me. It didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a release, like someone gently tracing over all the quiet wounds I hadn't cried for this past year. Someone filmed it. They also caught me laughing with Walter, with friends, sipping lemonade in the sun. The video ended up online, and in a matter of days, it spread. The comments rolled in. Strangers saying things that made my chest tighten in the best way. She's what a real leading lady looks like. Sending this to my mom. She needs to hear this story. I'm 67 and just moved out of my daughter's house. She never respected me. Now I live in a room above my friend's bookstore. and every day feels more like mine. I didn't read every comment, but Carla sent me screenshots. Every morning, she'd say, "Maggie, your story isn't just yours anymore. You lit a path." Later that week, I quietly transferred some money to Amy. Not enough to change her world, but enough for a clean, safe apartment, enough for a few months' rent, and a prepaid semester of Emma's school fees. I didn't include a note. No card. No explanation. It wasn't about healing. It wasn't an invitation back into my life. But Emma was innocent. She shouldn't have to pay for someone else's arrogance. What I gave wasn't habit. It wasn't guilt. It was the bare minimum kindness one adult offers another when they still believe the next generation deserves a softer landing. That night, I dreamt of Emma drawing a picture of me. She said, "Grandma smiles like springtime opening the door." Maybe that's what I want to leave behind. A version of me that no longer shrinks, that doesn't apologize, that arrives like spring clear, bright, and entirely unashamed. I never thought a house number would trip me up. That morning, Walter pulled an old oak plaque from the garage. Said it was time we got a new sign for the porch. If I wanted, he'd carve both our names on it. I didn't answer right away. Just made coffee and watched the light fall across the stones in the backyard. It flickered like memory. For 20 years, I'd lived under other people's names. After Frank died, I became Mrs. Delaney. Then James's mom, Amy's mom, Emma's grandma. To the neighbors, I was the widow on the corner. But none of that was mine. It took me this long to realize. I wasn't someone's leftover. I wasn't a role. I wasn't a gravestone etched with other people's legacies. I was me. I handed Walter a cup and finally said, "Just put Maggie M." He blinked. "Not Hayes." I shook my head. That M wasn't for Delaney anymore. And it sure wasn't for any man. That M was for Maggie. A few days later, I got a letter from Amy. A real letter. Ink and paper. Not a text. Not an email. The handwriting was crooked. The ink blotched in places, like she'd cried while writing it. No grand gestures. No dramatic please. Just a few lines that told the truth. "Mom, I don't know how to fix what I did, but I regret it. Everything you've ever done for May always remembered it. I just pretended I didn't. That day, when you said, 'You're only here because you need something, not because you understand,' I heard it. I really heard it. Emma misses you. Maybe when summer comes, you'll let me bring her to see you. Thank you for helping. Even when you had every reason not to. I won't take another thing from you. Ever." I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just slipped the letter into an old family photo album, tucked it between James's college graduation and a picture of Ethan learning to ride a bike. I didn't write back. Not because I hadn't forgiven her, but because I finally understood some relationships don't need a return trip. They just need to be seen for what they are. And let go. After another week, Walter and I went to the spring fair. I brought a few pots of homegrown herbs and set up a little corner in the community garden booth. Made a sign that read, "Granny Maggie's Garden." People kept asking if I was selling them. I told them no, just giving them away to folks who'd take good care of them. A young girl took a pot of thyme, looked up at me, and said, "You smile like my grandma." I smiled back. Then she must be a woman who knows how to grow things.